welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, where we celebrate the music and sound of Star Wars 5 cinematic minutes at a time. I'm Chrysanthi Tan, you can call me Xanthi, and today we're discussing the music and sound in minutes 76 through 80 of Star Wars A New Hope, which starts with the gang rescuing the princess and ends with them jumping into the garbage chute. Today's guest is Jeremy Sawruk, composer, music technologist. We finally made it happen, getting you on the show. I'm really excited to talk to you about this really action-packed set of minutes. And I know that you have prepared quite a few notes and musical things for us to chew on. It's going to be a really exciting episode, and I am happy to have you here.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I've listened to the Star Wars Minute podcast, I think, from the day it launched. So I've been listening for a long time, and I remember every time you came on talking about the music was always the most interesting to me. I wish more people had talked about that. And I remember there was something you had said during one of those episodes a couple of years ago. And whatever it was, I'm like, okay, that's part of it. Here's some more information about it. So I posted.
It was about orchestration in Rogue One.
Yeah, that's what it was. And we had this back and forth on Facebook.
Yeah.
And that's how I think that was what started the genesis of you realizing that, hey, people are interested in knowing more about the musical aspects of these films because there's so much there. And I think that may have been the kickoff point to start this podcast. So.
Yeah, it definitely was. It was like definitely a big part of it because, I mean, I had been on Star Wars Minute for many seasons and, you know, kind of touched upon the music a little bit, but it was not like the big feature because I knew, I mean, that's not like the point of the show. It just would come up
right.
since that's how since that's something I notice. Yeah. And it was like people like you, and especially like that long conversation we had that made me realize like that this could be something that I actually go into more, and that there would be more people other than just me who are interested. Yeah. Clearly, and here we have, and you are here. Actually, I will say that like, I remember being really, I really appreciated the comment that you gave because I'm so used to saying musical things and it going like completely unchallenged just because I think it's hard for people to talk about music. Unless they feel really confident about it. And I really like to be challenged because I just like to talk. I just like to have conversations, like, you know. And so that was like the first time that I had like an actual like substantive back and forth with someone about Star Wars music. And so, yeah.
And it wasn't confrontational. It's just, you know, we were coming at from different perspectives, which is great because music is so subjective that you have to look at the whole picture to try to understand it. And there's so many different ways to analyze and look at a piece of music, especially when it's in a film. There's just so much going on. So yeah.
It was an actual civil Facebook conversation. Wow.
I know, right?
Wow. So how about let's get into these minutes I'll just play some of the film clip.
We gotta find out which cell this princess of yours is in. Here it is, 2187. You go and get her. I'll hold him here.
Everything's under control. Situation normal.
What happened?
Had a slight weapons malfunction, but everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
We're sending a squad up.
Okay, I'll stop it here.
Negative. We have a react.
This, I'll let you start. What are your like initial thoughts about how we get thrust into this scene?
I think it's very effective. I should say that the clip that you sent starts already in the middle of a music cue, so we're immediately thrust into the action. One thing that I will say about this particular cue and this particular scene is there are so many triplets. It is just da 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 keeps going, keeps the momentum building. We start off immediately with this little horn triplet figure that's like da 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 da, and we see that a couple of times throughout these 5 minutes, where you have the horns and they're playing this fast figure and they're changing chords very quickly. And those chords are distantly related. They're related by a third. Mm-hmm. So like in these opening chords, you have an E flat major followed by a C major 7 followed by an A flat major in rapid succession. So that automatically like disorients you.
So it's E flat major to C7?
Mm-hmm. C major 7. And then to A flat.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, so they're like chromatic mediants.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let me play from your mock-up.
Oh, okay.
If you don't
mind.
mind.
Sure.
Yeah, so Jeremy made, many talents Jeremy has made. How would one describe a mock-up? It's like basically a version of the music, but synthesized.
Yeah, well, sample libraries, but this is a very common thing that happens in film music where, you don't get the pleasure to write and have the orchestra right in front of you. So in the old days, you would just have a piano, but now with all the computer technology, anyone can load up an orchestra sound. And so professional film composers use that as a way to convey their ideas and sketches to the director. And often these mock-ups are then used and given to the orchestrator to actually produce the final scores from.
Mm-hmm. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a mock-up before you hire the orchestra. And you'll hear it when I'm about to play it. It'll sound like it, but you'll be able to tell it's not an orchestra.
Right. It's computer.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, we did the thirds already.
Yeah. Do it. If you could play
we'll do it again. Yeah. So it's the thirds that we were talking about. So it's triplets. That's the rhythm. I know it's like a lot of 3 words that have 3 in them. So the triplet refers to the rhythm, and that's like 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. And the thirds refers to the harmonic relationship. And so a third is an interval that is separated, by 3 notes.
Like
exactly. Mm-hmm. So it's just right here at the beginning. That's it. Before that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and that descending figure that comes right after that helps, it kind of puts the brakes on a little bit, because now we're going down, we hit this long note, and something has changed at that point. So.
Oh yeah, that's a good that's a good way to put it. Like putting the brakes on it. That's exactly what it sounds like. And you're talking about the or whatever it is. Yeah, it kind of anchors the triplets, which are fast, and the harmony is like moving quickly. It's like, it's a really classic, like John Williams-esque line to do brass triplets and to have like the thirds and everything. But then we have I'll play it a little bit further, and you'll hear that like sort of a lower brass instrument nails it down at the end. That's good stuff. Like it's such it's detailed underscore, which is something that this film has in spades.
Yes, quite a bit. And when we get to the later cue in this clip, there's a lot of music going on where you just can't even hear it. Mm-hmm. But if it wasn't there, you would notice it.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. We'll get there, but the details are pretty astounding. And if you're following along on the soundtrack, you'll be able to hear this part on a track called Wookiee Prisoner or Detention Block Ambush. And this set of minutes starts at about 2:35 of that. So I think it'd be interesting to also play it from the soundtrack so you can hear how the difference is. Well, we're hearing it 3 ways. We heard it as it was in the minutes with the talking on top, which you could barely hear it. because the blaster and Han Solo and everything. And then we heard it with the mock-up, which was kind of a very like, almost like a very pure way of hearing like just purely what's happening. And then there's the recorded version, which is a totally different, note-wise, it'll be the same as the mock-up, but you'll be able to hear like the subtle variation in like the live players in the in the live instruments and in the way it was recorded, and maybe some slight mistakes, which I love. Yeah.
Tempo. This was recorded. John Williams doesn't use a lot of click tracks. I know that some cues will be very strict to click, others will vary a little bit. So there might be some slight tempo variations to speed up and hit a particular point in the action. So, in fact, we have one of these coming up that I want to talk about. So, we see Han, is at the console, and the Imperial officer falls down onto the floor. He slides the console and falls on the floor. Well, at that point, the strings are actually going down in time with them, and then they hit on the downbeat when he falls on the floor.
Oh, nice. Okay. I'm going to play it and point it out when you hear it happening. All right.
Sure.
Okay. So here. Oh, yeah,
that.
right there.
Da-da-da-bum.
Oh, yeah.
You saw that?
It's like the cello kind of hits it at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, we already passed it, huh?
Yeah.
It was just that part.
It goes da 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 da, and then the strings go da 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 da.
Oh yes. I love that string line, and I love how like on this recording, I'll export this podcast in stereo. So if you're listening on headphones or something, you'll be able to hear basically the stereo panning of the instruments. Yeah. I love how like kind of messy the violins sound there. That's something I'm not used to hearing in recordings anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really great sound, and it's one of those things where compositionally the notes really don't matter. The actual pitches at the end of the day aren't as important as the overall gesture of, okay, I need to create some momentum, I need to get the strings up. You're not going to hear the individual pitches anyway, so they aren't as important as the overall effect. So if they're smearing a little bit or whatever, that's great.
Yeah, like the gist of them matters a little bit, but I think like as long as you are kind of remaining in a sort of a similar like pitch set or whatnot,
right.
It is not one of those things where like me as a violinist who has played many things like this, we sort of know or composers communicate in advance like which parts are more gestural, like you said. And sometimes the gesture is just like the rising and falling, or it's the way, the grittiness of it, or it's some other part of the shape or something. And that is definitely the case in a lot of action cues, or a lot of things that can be described as like frenetic or okay. Let's see. Should we continue playing the minutes, or I know you have...
Yes.
Okay.
We've spent quite a bit on
just that beginning.
Like, a couple of seconds.
Let's get to the end of Han's scene here.
Okay.
Okay, I'll start.
Everything's under control. Situation normal.
We can talk over
What
it.
happened?
Had a slight weapons
Well, there's
malfunction,
that music
but
here.
everything's perfectly all right now.
Wait.
We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
Where's
When he
the
says Howard,
Uh,
a little timpani that starts adding some rhythmic interest. But like I said, it mixed way down. I think if you listen to it on the soundtrack, you should be able to hear it. But I was only able to isolate it by running it through a filter and then phase canceling the center channel, and then it comes out on the sides.
Oh, tricky. Yeah, this is.
So,
Sorry, I think I talked to. We have a tiny bit of a lag here, so sorry, but the cello underscore there is. It's like the frenetic violin stuff drops out when Han Solo is talking, and there still is music, but it is kind of like that slower cello line, and it's all in like
right.
a pretty low register. It doesn't really compete with his voice.
And that important part is, we talk about having to clear the dialogue so that the music doesn't interfere, and this is a perfect example.
Yeah, can you say more about that?
Sure. So I did a master's degree in film scoring at what is now University of North Carolina School of the Arts. And one of the early lessons in that program was being able to write around the dialogue. So making both room so that the pitches don't interfere, and as well as making time for dialogue. So if you have an important word and you might want to put a rest there, even if it's an action scene, or reduce the orchestration, and have the dialogue come through, because most of the time the dialogue is the most important part of the sound mix.
Yes, yes. And that's something that can't be overlooked. When talking about the music or when talking about the music of Star Wars, or the music of any sort of film, the tendency can be to concentrate on the soundtrack and like the CD, like, the commercial soundtrack, or like the actual tracks, like in their perfect form, in their perfect full form.
Right.
But then when you actually put it with the film, you realize how much is missing, or how the mix is different, or how much the dialogue is actually a crucial, the most important part of the soundscape. The dialogue is absolutely part of it.
Right.
Can't really be overlooked in a discussion about the music, because so often, like, the music is meant to fit around the dialogue on purpose.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I see in your notes that you gave me, which Jeremy, like A+ on this assignment. You wrote the horn and pizzicato violins and violas play a rhythmic background figure. You wrote that.
That's a little bit before where we are now. That's a bump, 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 bump.
Yeah.
That little figure.
And then the music under Han's exchange with the intercom is in the cellos and basses, so that it does not interfere with the dialogue. So you totally have that in your notes. The pitches don't matter as much as the motion, and then the timpani builds tension.
Right.
And then
it starts right when he says, "How are you?" And there's like that slight emotional shift, because he was acting very serious, and then he starts to become very casual, and that breaks. That's a shift in what's going on in the scene, and that's going to lead to more tension.
Yeah, and the cellos do this thing where it's like, let me go louder.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like a chromatic, sort of like a turn, where it doesn't really move a whole bunch, but it's sort of, figures like this kind of remind me of like stalling, which is exactly what Han is basically doing here.
Exactly.
So when we move along in this scene, first of all, I think the dialogue in this scene is very funny. Like, I think Han's delivery is hilarious. I don't know, like,
might be dialogue in the movie.
Your favorite dialogue in the movie?
It might be. Yeah, it's really good.
It is really good, and I don't know how much of it was improv, or I don't know. I feel like the acting is hilarious. So sort of the delivery of like, we're all fine, we're all fine here, and the funniest line to me is, "How are you?"
Right.
Which is such like a, I don't know, it's such a believable, like, nervous thing to ask.
I like the way that Family Guy lampooned this particular scene at that moment where, Peter's playing Han and he becomes like a radio DJ. It's like, "And how are you?"
Oh, really?
The guy in the interview, like, well, things could be better.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's the Family Guy spoofs are hit and miss, but they have their moments for sure.
Nice. But yeah, classic line. And then of course, the calm voice is like, we're sending a squad up. And he's like, negative, negative. We have a reactor leak here now.
Right.
Large leak, very dangerous.
Which that line of dialogue reminds me of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they're in and he goes, "Asps, very dangerous. You go first." It's the same. It just recalled that.
Yeah. That's one of the few lines I remember off the top of my head from that movie. Probably because I think he also says like very dangerous on the ride at Disneyland. I think. Maybe. I don't know. But let me continue playing.
Sure.
Negative. We have a reactor leak here now. Give us a few minutes to lock it down. Large leak, very dangerous.
Who is
He
this?
kind of laughs
What's your
there.
operating number?
Boring conversation anyway. Luke, we're gonna have company!
Okay. So here we have a transition. All right, a lot just happened.
So there's a lot going on there. So that's the Rebel Fanfare is what it's referred to.
Mm-hmm.
The da-da, dun, da-da, dun. And that also is those chords in that mediant relation that we talked about before, just with the horns at the beginning. John Williams tends to do a lot with that. And part of the reason for that is in Western music, we're very much aware of the overtone series and the circle fifths. If you hear a certain chord, you expect it to go someplace. When you're dealing with these third relations, you're breaking away from that circle of fifths. So it sounds different. You don't know where things are going. And so it does give this kind of fantasy feel to it. So that's one of the reasons why he does that. It's also very common in a lot of the early 20th century orchestral music and late 19th century orchestral music that Williams was influenced by.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So the Rebel Fanfare, of course, is the and okay, chromatic mediants or mediants in general. Mediant just refers to, isn't it sort of like the chords are a third apart?
Right.
What is
so
mediant?
in classical terminology, every note in the scale has a specific function and they give a name to that function. And so you have the tonic, the subdominant, and then the mediant would be the third note. And then the submediant would be the opposite direction. So E
Sixth.
And A would be the mediant and submediant for key of C.
Right. Okay. So the way that I've explained this on a previous episode is, imagine you have a baseball team. I don't know anything about sports. So imagine you have a team of sports people, a sports team, and
Sports people.
Yeah, sports people. And there are 7 positions on the team. And so you pick 7 players to be on your team and they all play like a different role. One of those roles is called the tonic. One of those roles is called the supertonic. Another role is called the mediant. Another role is called subdominant. Another role is called dominant. Another role is called submediant. Another role is called leading tone. And those are the players you have to work with if you are sort of in the quote unquote normal way of writing stuff, which is like diatonic, which just means you are writing music where you're using all the players that you picked for your team. So when you if you are in a particular key and you are trying to invoke the mediant chord, normally that would be like the player, that you picked for the mediant position, and that's it. But what's happening here is there's chromatic mediant motion. And so chromatic is like when you are swapping out players or you are bringing other players in that don't usually fit on your team, but you're having them join you anyway. And so that's how you end up with stuff that's not just like, but it's like, There's kind of like some extra in between shades or like chroma, chromatics. And you can think of it like in terms of colors too. Like if you're trying to work with primary colors, then you add in like different shades. That's also like that's chromatics basically. So what's happening here is like instead of going to the usual mediant, it's like going to a chromatic mediant, a mediant chord that should not exist in that key. But it's close. But it's kind of close. But it's different. It kind of like throws you off.
So I think a concrete example here might help to clarify between a diatonic mediant and a chromatic mediant. So if you could play C major and then E minor. So both of those chords only use the notes from the C major scale. That opening chord motion, the 1 to 3, always reminds me of the beginning of David Bowie. Ziggy played guitar, minor 3, da 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 da. Now, if you could play C major and then E flat major.
E flat major?
Yep. That's a chromatic mediant because the pitches E flat and B flat are not in the scale of C major.
Yeah. Sound familiar? So, chromatic mediant in the Rebel Fanfare. And in many places in Star Wars, many places, many. So here, when we hear the Rebel Fanfare here, we hear it superimposed on top of the martial rhythm, the do 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 do, which I always think is an interesting juxtaposition. That's not really it fits, like it doesn't even register as a juxtaposition until kind of parsing those things apart. And I think it's easy for me at least to get the Rebel Fanfare mixed up with like, which side does it belong to sometimes? Because I associate it with like warfare in general.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So shall I continue playing?
Sure. Go ahead.
Too little short for a stormtrooper.
Huh? Oh, the uniform.
I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
You're who?
I'm here to rescue you. I've got your R2 unit. I'm here with Ben Kenobi.
Ben Kenobi, where is he?
Come on.
That's so funny.
So there, in the section you played, there are 3 really good hit points where the music changes in response to what's happening on screen. So the first one is when the door opens and you see Princess Leia and her theme comes in right away. In fact, as the door is opening is when it picks up.
Yes, and you can hear it here because you can hear you can hear.
Form.
I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
You'll hear the door.
Too little short for a stormtrooper.
Huh? Oh,
After
the uniform.
string, clear the dialogue.
Yeah, that little string thing where after Princess Leia's theme is sort of like connective tissue, like waiting for Leia to say her line before the main theme comes in.
Right. Absolutely. And that's just to keep the music going and, not have these sharp edges, that connection, like you said.
Totally. Leia's theme, I think it's funny that it's so like obviously tailored exactly to this theme because it's not really the whole like long florid like version of her theme. It's just like a short soundbite and it's pretty fast. And, it's just a quick little phrase from it before the little connective tissue of the strings. And here, obviously, like this is the main theme, but I guess it's not super obvious because it's missing a couple notes. It's sort of, well, here's what I hear. Tell me if you,
Okay.
I
Sure.
hear. Oh, I hear like. So I'll play it again.
Sure.
Short for stormtrooper.
Huh? Oh, the uniform.
I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
You're who?
I'm here to rescue you. I've got your R2 unit.
So it's like very close, but it doesn't quite go.
That's the main theme, though.
Yeah.
I thought we were talking about Leia's theme.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I moved on.
We're on to the main theme. That's okay. So what's interesting is that, yeah, it's just a little fragment, a little, recollection, just so you have that association. But it starts, that pickup note, that bum, bum, that bum, starts as soon as Luke removes his helmet. And once he removes it, that's when the theme comes in, because that's kind of like Luke's theme.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then it stops again, just the horn and the trumpet are holding notes to have the dialogue happen.
Yes. Okay, let's hear that again.
Oh, the uniform.
I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
You're who?
I'm here to rescue you. I've got your R2 unit. I'm here with Ben Kenobi.
Ben Kenobi, where is he?
Come on.
Yeah, it like really gracefully transitions. Like it does get out of the way for the rest of the dialogue, but then it also, like the underscore shifts as like Leia's getting excited to hear Ben Kenobi's name.
Yeah, as soon as she says Ben Kenobi, then it actually is faster, and you have this, rhythmic figure.
Yeah. It's the rhythm that comes in. The main theme is something that's been interesting to hear develop over the course of this film, because when we hear it, it's so familiar that it's a little bit hard to trace like how all the different instances. I don't know. It's been hard. It's been illuminating for me to go through the movie 5 minutes at a time and remind myself that how many times the main theme appears, but just like in woodwinds or just like in really like naive orchestrations of it. That's not the triumphant, like full on like brass that we hear when the main title appears or in the opening crawl. And here, this reminds me of like, this is like an intermediate version of the theme to me. Because prior to this, we hear it a lot in the woodwinds, and it's a very like homespun kind of. It reminds me of like naive Luke. It's like
right, and
here it's like now we're getting it not on woodwinds, but we're getting it in brass. But it's still like not fully. It's not fully like it's not the full thing. It's not fully fledged out. Mm-hmm. But still, it is like associated with him taking his helmet off and sort of like I'm here to rescue you. It is like. Definitely a hero theme in this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great observation. I hadn't noticed that. I really like that analysis. It shows the role of the instruments and orchestration as part of the presentation of the music. So you have the character development, and it's reflected in the instrumentation. So when he's, earlier in the film, and it's woodwinds, and it's very pastoral. Now it's starting to become heroic, but it's still, you have only one trumpet and the horn, so you don't have the full brass section yet. And then at the end, it will become the full brass section. So in a way, the instrumentation is carrying that developmental journey of the character.
Yeah, that's such an important aspect to these scores, because the focus can be sometimes too much on just what the actual themes are, what the actual melody and harmony is, or what the theme is, but so much of it is how the theme is realized in that moment and how that can develop. I think instrumentation is like, or orchestration is one of the more critical things in the Star Wars scores that is harder to talk about. You have a great deal of orchestration, or like certainly more orchestration experience than I do. What are some instances where you would use one instrument over another, or groups of them?
So that's a very open-ended question. The way that I think about the groups of instruments in the orchestra is that your strings are the primary. That's like your level set. That's where you're starting from. If you bring in the woodwinds, you get a darker color on top of that. if you instead bring in the brass, you get a brighter color on top of that. If you take the strings out, now you're starting to get different associations. So if you have just the woodwinds, you're going to have that very pastoral, for the most part. You can have dreamlike or whatever. If you have just the brass, it becomes very martial, very militaristic through, these associations that we have. So that's where I'd start with the groups of instruments. And then for individual instruments, a lot of it comes on tone color. So like a horn and a trumpet share a lot of notes in common, but they sound very different. So a horn is rounder. Mm-hmm. So if I want
think of the original, think of Binary Sunset French horn.
Yeah. Yes. Staring at the French horn. So if you have a French horn, it will sound a little bit rounder. And so it won't be as in your face, right?
Piercing.
Whereas the trumpet has exactly.
Does it matter the register? Like low winds,
absolutely,
high?
Oh yeah, and it certainly matters more in certain instruments. The register always is important, but the one instrument that has extremely distinct characteristics across the register is the clarinet. They actually have different names for the different registers. Like this is the Chalmeau register. This is the Clarino register. So.
Oh, I didn't know that about the clarinet.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with it, but I do know, like, if I'm referring to a violin or something, I'll just say the low part or the mid part or the high part. Clarinets have their own nomenclature.
Oh, okay. Good to know. I mean, the woodwinds are so varied, and I think woodwinds are more so than strings. Like strings are usually considered a unit, or if anything, low strings and high strings. Like strings are a big unit. It's kind of rare that when we're talking about strings, we're talking about a solo violin, although that happens sometimes, but it's pretty rare. But sometimes we talk about the upper strings, like violin. Honestly, upper strings kind of just means violins, and sometimes means violins and violas. But you have to understand there are so many violins in an orchestra. That's the highest number of instruments in an orchestra, and in an orchestra, there are also usually 2 violin sections. So like half of the violins will be playing violin 1 and half of the violins will be playing violin 2. So it's like you have 2 distinct parts kind of baked into one instrument there. And the celli and basses are lower, and those sometimes go together as well as the lower unit. But with woodwinds, it's like there's low woodwinds, which can have like bassoon, bass clarinet, a few others. And there, on the other end, you have like piccolo and flute and these other instruments. And then woodwinds are often soloed. So you have them in groups, and you also have them a ton as soloists. So there's quite a lot of variety. And in these scores, like especially like in Princess Leia's theme, for example, that's like a good example of that's one that starts out on the oboe earlier in the film. We also hear it at times on like French English horn. Here we're hearing it on flute. So it's kind of making the rounds to different instruments.
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct. Each woodwind instrument has its own individual character, whereas other instrument families, they're more homogeneous. Strings are very homogeneous. Brass basically breaks into the trombones and the trumpets versus the horns and the tuba, but each woodwind instrument has its own unique, distinct flavor. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're featured as solos, because they can cut through the strings a little bit and bring that color, that character to the music at that moment. And this is a great segue, because I want to talk about where this scene and the music ends, because there's the transition wipe where it goes into the next scene and you see Darth Vader, right? And there's a low E flat minor chord played on 3 bassoons in close position. What I mean by close position is harmonically close. It's all on top of each other. When you're that low, it sounds very muddy, and so this is very purposeful.
Okay. So you mean close like that?
Yes.
And I believe what you're referring to is like you have one bassoon playing this note, well, an octave lower, but one bassoon playing this note, one bassoon playing this note. E minor. Now, a way to do that more openly is you could have one bassoon playing this note, another one going, and another one up here. So, it's still the same chord, but you could have it occupying a bigger range altogether.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So the way that it's voiced with the bassoons having the very reedy character, especially in that low register, and then having that closed position harmony that far down, because we're talking the E flat below the bass clef, right? That first ledger line below the bass clef. It sounds very ominous.
Yeah. It sounds ominous, and like you said, it sounds muddy, and like it would be hard to pick out what each individual note is being played there. And this sort of sound, that sort of like low bassoon, closed position, chord is often associated with Imperials. And here, in fact, we hear it as exactly where you're saying, where the scene changes.
Come on.
He is here.
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
But it's so low. I'll play it on your mock-up. So it's after this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like when it's full volume.
Yeah. Yeah, the music really is at the mercy of the dialogue once the final mix comes into play.
Sure.
It's like barely audible in the film right there, but that's indeed what it is. And as is often the case when Tarkin and Vader are talking, the music is very sparse, or if there at all.
Right. Yeah, there's no music in this scene here. One last thing that I do want to point out about the previous scene is the alarm that goes off when Han first enters. I never noticed this before, but that's actually in time with the tempo. It actually fits as eighth notes in the tempo.
Oh.
I had to listen several times, and it does fit. So
That's really, what do you, like, we don't know for sure, but what do you reckon the order of operations was? Like, do you think John Williams scored that after the sound design was there, or vice versa?
I think it may have been vice versa. It's hard to tell.
Yeah. You can only speculate.
But that alarm is a C sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because there's an alarm that goes off in the scene with Tarkin, and that alarm is also a C sharp. Mm-hmm. So I want to know why Imperial alarms are tuned to C sharp.
This is actually, I'm going to add that to I have like a running note of the different alarm sounds. So, because I'm interested in like the klaxon, like the sirens.
Right.
And how the different, or basically they are internally consistent. So I'm not like trying to, I don't know, track them for any reasons like that. But I'm interested because when I hear sirens in like other media, it kind of sort of ground me sometimes in like, oh, this is first Death Star, or like, oh, this is the second Death Star siren, or whatnot. So I'm gonna add that to my list of ones to pay attention to. Yeah, okay, that's noted. Do you play the Star Wars video games? at all?
No, I actually not big into video games.
Okay.
So I remember playing Star Wars video games on Atari and NES, and that was about it.
Me neither, but I find that the people who are most attuned to like alarm sounds or like random little sound design things are the people who play the video games.
Interesting.
Yeah, it makes sense, I suppose, because if you hear that sound so many times when playing a video game, and I don't know, I feel like video games or anything that's like gamified like that has a tendency to really stick in your brain in a very special way.
Yeah.
So yeah, people who play video games are usually like my go-to when it comes to identifying sounds. Yeah. So let's move on to where are we now? Okay, we're in the Tarkin scene, and this honestly, I interpret the scene so much differently as an adult than I did as a kid. Actually, I don't really know how I was interpreting it as a kid, but the more I consider these Vader Tarkin scenes, the more I realize that like Vader does not care about what's happening really with the Death Star. Like Vader is more like Luke and Obi-Wan than Vader is like any of the Imperials. It's the Force against, he's like defending the Force. He's always defending the Force.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting observation.
And here, Tarkin does a little bit of the trilling his R's.
Yeah.
As he does. So I'll play a little bit of this. Let's see, where are we?
Come on.
He is here.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. What makes you think so?
A tremor in the Force. The last time I felt it was in the presence of my old master.
Surely he must be dead by now.
Don't underestimate the Force.
There you go.
The Jedi are extinct. Their fire has gone out of the universe. You, my friend, are all that's left of their religion. Yes.
We have an emergency alert in detention block AA-23.
The Princess? Put all sections on alert.
Obi-Wan is here.
Vader
The
just cares about
Force is with
Obi-Wan.
him.
The Force
You're
is with
right. He must not be allowed to escape.
Escape is not his plan. I must face him alone.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Here we
one of
have
the
another
other
one of those, sort of transitional stingers.
Yeah. One of the other things I noticed when listening to the scene in detail that I hadn't noticed before is that Vader appears to be breathing in and out while he's talking, which I'm not sure is physically possible.
Well, it tells us something about his breathing apparatus and how it must be detached from his speaking.
Right. Yeah. I never noticed that before. I'm like, he's inhaling while he's speaking. That's tough.
Yeah. It's an interesting sound design. It's an interesting sound design detail that without even like telling us how his suit works, it sort of forces us to tease those two things apart, like realize, oh, that's impossible unless his suit is mechanically unless his breathing is mechanical and coming from something else. And that's exactly what's happening. I mean, I guess we didn't know that at the time, or no one knew that at the time, but since then, we have learned a little bit more about his suit and the extent of his injuries, which were significant. Honestly, here Vader he comes off sort of almost like a pacifist, compared to Tarkin. Tarkin wants to get rid of everyone. He wants to, apprehend the princess. He wants to take care of the rebels. He wants to send messages. And Vader's just like, and Tarkin, wants to kill Obi-Wan. Vader's like, or wants to prevent him from escaping. And Vader's just like, escape is not his plan. I must face him alone. He's not like, I will kill him. He just knows that he has to face him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting because I'm still, even with all the backstory from the prequels, not entirely sure why he needs to face him at this moment. It's interesting. I feel like I'm still missing a piece of information. So
I almost get the sense that he's trying to, that he feels his master in the Force. And so either the answer is somewhere in something that he's feeling in the Force is telling him that he needs to face him. Also, maybe the fact that they haven't seen each other in decades. And so it must be significant if he's feeling that his master is here. Right. And, if he has, I don't know, I can imagine, and there is quote unquote evidence from other books and comics since then that he knows about or that he might be questioning his role in the Empire, or he might not be super on board with the Emperor, or he's kind of always trying to be bad, like Kylo in a way. But I get the sense that he's also just trying to he wants to protect his like Force world from Tarkin, because Tarkin doesn't get it. So he's like, don't take care of Obi-Wan. Like I'll take care of it alone. The alone part is the most salient part of that sentence for me. Yeah. Which is good. I'm glad Tarkin doesn't ever face Obi-Wan here. That would be weird. Weird. So then we have that sort of transitional stinger. And if you're following along on the soundtrack, this is the start of Shootout in the Cell Bay / Dianoga. So we hear an ominous buzzing sound. And so we're in the hallway, and we're back with Chewie and Han and Luke and Leia. And it's this like hallway scene, which visually, I love the floor of it. Like, I think the floor is so cool, and it makes a really cool sound when people are running across it, the grates on the floor or whatever. And we hear those brass triplets again that you were pointing out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those show up quite a bit. So, and then we immediately after that we hear the da 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 da, which I've heard is called the Imperial motif. So this is before we had the Imperial March. This was one of the signifiers of the Empire from a leitmotif standpoint.
Yep, and let's play some of that.
Are there any other ways out of the cell bay? We've been cut off!
Can't get out that way.
Looks like you managed to cut off our only escape route.
Maybe you'd like it back in your cell, Your Highness.
C-3PO! C-3PO! Are there any other ways out of the cell bay? We've been cut off!
Well, there's a lot of shooting, so if you're actually following along in the film, you probably won't hear much music there, but it's there really softly.
It's there.
And just right there, we heard the Rebel fanfare again.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few scene changes here, but still it's basically they're trying to escape, which eventually leads them, of course, to jumping into the garbage chute. But before then, it's like very rapid dialogue. And I don't know if you wanted to add something to that part.
I mean, the music is mixed very low because there's so much action going on. When we get to C-3PO, then the music kind of just lets up a little bit because we're taken out of the action and we need to hear his dialogue pretty clearly. So that's coming up when he reaches out to 3PO on the intercom.
Oh, that's a good point because the droids are in a different place.
Right.
Okay, yeah, let's hear some of that, actually.
Way in or out. All other information on your level is restricted.
Open up in there. Open up in there.
Right. So he wouldn't have the same blaster fire.
There's any other way out!
I can't hold off forever. Now what?
This is some rescue. When you came in here, didn't you have a plan for getting out?
He's the brains, sweetheart.
It's chaotic.
What the hell are you doing?
Somebody has to save our skins. Into the garbage chute, flyboy.
I love how her sound changes there. You can tell that she's like speaking in a different location there.
Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely hear some of the edits as they re-edited in the dialogue are, not very consistent.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like Carrie Fisher's dialogue cuts through a lot more than the others. It might just be like the register for voice, but also it might be that her lines are so good that they just have to keep it open there.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of classic. This is like so much is happening here. Okay, of course we have what's the exact line? Someone has to save our skins. Somebody has to save our skins. Into the garbage chute, flyboy. Which the original, like the script says wise guy. And I don't know if that was like an improv or a change or just like a typo in the script. Do you have any idea? I don't know.
I have no idea. I don't know how the script evolved. But I have a feeling that it was probably changed. It might have been improvised, but wise guy would not have the same impact.
No,
no,
not at all.
I want to go back just for 1 second to when we see C-3PO and you hear the knocking on the door, right? And as it changes back to the action scene with Luke and Han, there's actually a crescendo after that knock starts to show the building tension again. As we return from, 3PO's basically secure, and now he's not, and we're returning back to that action scene.
Oh, okay. Is it before what I just played before?
Yeah, so 3PO is in there. He's saying, everyone's been alerted to your position. And then they go, open up in there. And there's this...
Oh, okay.
Are there any other ways out of the cell bay? We've been cut off!
Is it before this?
What was that? I didn't copy!
I said all systems have been alerted to your presence, sir. The main entrance seems to be the only way in or out. All other information on your level is restricted.
Open up in there. Open up in there.
There isn't any other way out.
Yes, I heard that.
Yeah.
It's like the crescendo is like 3PO's emotions there.
Yeah, exactly.
His droid emotions. There's a lot of subtle, or there's a lot of good worldizing here with all the different locations within the Death Star having sort of a different sound to them. And I know that probably all of it's ADR, but still it is, it's mixed or filtered or whatever in such a way that it's clear even just from listening without looking that these characters are in different locations that have different, room sounds to them.
Yeah.
The comm voices, by the way, apparently that was Ben Burt and his friends. They recorded a ton of Imperial comm sounding chatter in a church and then just sprinkled that throughout the film.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So after Into the Garbage Chute, Flyboy, that's where we hear the Imperials motif. And we've heard it many times throughout the film already. And like Jeremy said, it's it's what we had before Darth Vader's theme. So that's it.
Get in there, you big furry hole! I don't care what you smell! Get in there, don't worry about it! Wonderful girl! Either I'm gonna kill her or I'm beginning to like her!
I think it's very interesting here how the music sort of slows down underneath.
Right. Yeah, it happens right at that line where either beginning to like her, or whatever the actual dialogue. And it just, I think the reason it slows down is because we're about to transition out of the action scene. So it's like, preparing us for the end of this scene.
Oh, I interpret the slowing down there as like we have truly reached the end of our rope and there's nothing left to do but go into the garbage chute. It's sort of like a running out of steam almost.
Yeah, that's great interpretation. I like it.
And then they jump into the garbage chute, and I think it's so funny how I don't know who says it. I think it's probably Han, but like there's this loud like woo. Did you pick up on that?
That of course that's the famous Han, oh scream.
Oh, is that what is the story?
I don't know what the story is, but it's always stuck out to me.
Oh, really? Okay.
Like over the top, hamming it up. So, but I believe it's Han.
That's
yeah,
good.
that.
That's really funny.
It sounds like it reminds me of the character Goofy. That's what it reminds. That's
oh, really?
Yeah.
It's funny how like toward the end of it, I almost sort of start to believe that it's part of the music too.
Yeah.
It's really he really commits to it. Goes for it.
But when he's falling, there's this big glissando downward in the harp and the piano and all of that. Mm-hmm. And then once he actually he lands on the garbage, the music stops. And
there's a thud.
There is a thud. Yes. So, but that is Mickey Mousing 101, right? The character falls, so the music falls. The character stops, the music stops. So it's very animated in that moment, and it's done for comedic effect, and it works, really well.
Yeah. It's funny that it's called Mickey Mousing. But yes, it's animated, and literally this technique is used a lot in animation. And the glissando just means like we're sliding down. Like if you imagine the harp, it's like the harp doing that thing where it just plays all the notes and just like, and then, I think, and then it just goes like, I should have played the different notes to be in the same key, but it ends on a thud, just on a single, and then we just hear the like pretty gross like sounds of like the water. Mm-hmm. Like I have like a phobia of baths and like bodies of water. So here is just like all this like slopping around in this like garbage pond sounds. And Chewie agrees with me here.
Yes. So the sound design in this scene, I find the sounds of the creature to be interesting, the growls and all of that. I'm not entirely sure what sources they use to create those sounds.
You're referring to the Dianoga? Yeah. Yeah. The script says calls it an inhuman like terrible noise or something like that. And I wonder how much of it is actually what the Dianoga sounds like and how much of it is like the sound of the garbage chute emphasizing, making it reverberate even more. I think it's probably both. Here it says loud, horrible, inhuman moan is how that is described. Have you been to Disneyland?
I have, but not in a while. I haven't even. The last time I was in California at all was in January of 2020, and it'd probably been 5 years before that since I'd been to Disneyland. So it's been a while.
So in Galaxy's Edge, in one set of the restrooms, they have the Dianoga sounds like piping through the speakers. So yeah, they really play up the fact that the Dianoga is living in the pipes there. So you hear those sounds while you're using the restroom at Disneyland.
Oh, that
it's fun. I mean, if a Dianoga is actually, I don't know if we know if they're like actually. Oh no, they are threatening. They can drown you. Yeah, that's true. They can. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can grab you.
Yeah.
But on land, would I have any reason to be scared of a Dianoga? Probably not.
No. That's an interesting question. I don't know.
Here I am considering whether I'm safe at Disneyland. And I'm thinking, well, there's a lot of people. Like if there were a Dianoga to appear I would probably be out in a favorable position to be on land with thousands of people around me.
Okay. Good way to think about it.
Yeah. So I don't have to be worried about that anymore.
No.
Were you going to say anything else about the sound?
No, I think that's pretty much all that I have to say about the sound in the scene. Overall, like you said, there's a lot going on in these 5 minutes. There's a ton of music. There's a lot of stuff that we barely, scratch the surface on because there's just so much of it. And a lot of it is you can't hear. But if we removed that from the mix, you would notice its absence. And I think that shows the importance of music in these types of action scenes where, you have a lot of dialogue, you have a lot of sound effects going on, but the music still plays an important role.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to sort of tie up like all these ends with the music, because different people in films will have, because film is so collaborative, different people have different priorities. And of course, the composer is always going to want like their music to be heard, and the sound designer wants their music to be heard. The actors want their dialogue to be heard. I mean, there are just so many competing elements. And at the end of the day, I think the hardest job on a film would be like to be one of the editors, to negotiate all of those things and decide like which of these amazing aspects, like how to prioritize them basically. And it's nice that we have things like the soundtracks and the, art books or scripts or whatever, so that if we're particularly interested in one of the aspects and want to hear that in more detail, we can refer to that. So, here, that's why one might want to listen to Wookiee Prisoner / Detention Block Shootout or Shootout in the Cell and Cell Bay and Dianoga, because there you can hear the cues really clearly. But
on the cue sheet, it's the first clip that we listened to is actually called More Rescue, and the other clip later in is called The Rescue, which is confusing. So it suggests that maybe there wasn't music initially when Han and Chewie entered, and that might have been a later consideration. I'm not sure.
Can you explain what a cue sheet is?
Sure. A cue sheet tells, basically lists all of the music that will be used in the film. And in the old days, when you had to do it, everything was organized by reel. So you'd have, this is the music that goes with reel 1, reel 2, reel 3 of the music. So it's separate from the visual reels because the final edit isn't done at this point. It's close, but it may change. So everything's referred to by music reels. In today's language, we might say this is cue 1M3. So first music, selection number 3. That's going to be early in the film, where something like this is going to be like 8M2 or something like that. That's later in the film. So these are actually, this cue is numbered Reel 8 Part 2. R8P2 is the number on that, which I find interesting. So the reason why you want to do this is because you want to keep things in order. Titles might not be available, or you might just, have to make up some random title. So it's easier in the earlier stages to refer to the numbers. And then when you actually do the recording, you're not necessarily going to record in the order that's in the movie. You generally record with the largest orchestra first and then whittle down to smaller and smaller. So you might be recording like the opening and then the ending. And then you might be recording the action scenes. And then the next day you might be recording more intimate scenes. So it helps the conductor and the orchestra manager, figure out what they're recording in what order.
Yep. When I spoke with a violinist who played on the Last Jedi soundtrack last season, I believe he I believe he said that the like final cue they recorded on day one.
Yeah, because that's a large orchestra.
And that makes sense. Yeah, because that's when the orchestra gets all big again with everyone. And yeah, sometimes when I play on scores, it's really just the numbers and no context, just, 8M, whatever.
Right.
Here, and also the cue names don't necessarily correspond. I mean, they rarely correspond with the commercial soundtrack names.
Right.
And there are going to be a ton more cues than there are soundtrack tracks, because cues they refer to like where they fit into the movie, and each track on the CD or whatever might have a couple cues in it, or might be spliced from like a few different sources.
Right. Like, doesn't that happen in Return of the Jedi with the big forest battle where it's actually like one cue but gets split because the action gets split? I think there's something like, but that can also happen.
Maybe. I mean, yes, that definitely also can happen. I'll have to get to Last Jedi season and look into that. In the notes that you gave me, you did mention that you know for a fact that this cue was orchestrated by Al Woodbury.
Yes. Yeah, and that's also in the Star Wars thematic catalog also mentions the orchestrators for these cues and the cues themselves with the corresponding cue numbers.
Yes. So, listeners, another plug for Frank Lehman's complete catalog of the musical themes of Star Wars. The cue sheets are at the back of the catalog, and I rarely refer to them. So thanks for actually looking. Thanks for actually looking at that. Orchestrators are really important on the soundtracks or in film scores. I think this brings it full circle to how we sort of met online. Can you talk a little bit about the process of like composer to orchestrator?
Sure. So there's the old process before MIDI and the new process since MIDI. So it's changed a little bit. The old process,
which would be this,
which would be this, and which John Williams still uses, but the majority of composers have abandoned today, is to do what's called a sketch on sheet, staff paper, and depending on the composer, it could be highly detailed or it could be very sparse. So you might write a melody, just put violins and flute, right? And then the orchestrator will take that and create take a new piece of staff paper and actually put the flute, line, put the violin line, make sure it's balanced, make sure there's range so it doesn't conflict with the other instruments, and look to say, oh, you know what? Maybe if I added a oboe at a lower dynamic level here, it could reinforce it because the lower strings are too loud here, and all this balance back and forth. So the composer is still doing the job of saying, here's the music, where it goes, what action points it's hitting, this is what the melody is, this is what the harmony is, this is what the general tone color is. And then the orchestrator fleshes out those details to be able to give them to the copyists who prepare the sheet music for the musicians. So that's the old way of doing it. John Williams is noted for doing very detailed sketches. So most sketches will be like 4 or 6 staffs. And that gives a pretty good level of detail. Like if I did a 6-staff sketch, 2 for woodwinds, 2 for brass, 2 for strings, would be really good. John Williams can often do 10 or even, more than that. And so he can get very detailed in what he does. And then the modern way of doing it is going back to the MIDI mockup. After a composer does a MIDI mockup, they'll send the MIDI file to an orchestrator whose job is to then disentangle the information in the MIDI file into something that actual musicians can use. And that's a whole complex thing on its own. But they still are doing that additional balancing work. So it's very similar to a colorist on a comic book. the comic book author still writes the dialogue, and you do the penciling, but then someone else comes in and does the coloring, and that's the orchestrator's job to do that coloring.
Yeah. Well stated, and really great point separating like pre-MIDI to post-MIDI. And MIDI is, what does it stand for again?
Musical Instrument Digital Interface.
Yeah. And
so
you're kind of an expert at that.
Yeah.
It's how computers translate, or how would you describe it?
It's how computers and synths and samplers talk to each other. It's a standard...
Like droids.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so theoretically, you could share music through this language called MIDI, and one computer can make it sound, can realize it in one instrument, another computer can do it in another instrument, and it's sort of like raw. It's a more raw form than having like the recording of something, because you can actually further manipulate MIDI if you have MIDI files. Yeah, I think that makes sense. But yeah, these days, normally you'd get something more that sounds more like this. Well, if this. Yeah, and the orchestrator would orchestrators do the Lord's work sometimes. Honestly. Awesome. Is there anything else in these minutes that you wanted to touch upon, musically or sound wise? There's so
much. I know that there is just so much. I think we've hit everything. I definitely learned a lot going through this in such fine detail to, learn so much about how much effort went into this and just how much is going on and learning new things. Probably the one thing that I do want to say that we didn't get a chance to touch on is if we go back to when we're transitioning to Obi-Wan, and just before it goes to Han and Chewie back in the action scene, so there's this little like sustained music, and you just have this drone of this chord, and it's a B flat minor chord. And right before the transition, to build more of that tension, bring us back to the action scene, John Williams puts an A major chord on top of it. So you have this polychord of A major over B flat minor, and all of that is over a D drone, a D natural drone. So you have this extremely dissonant pitch collection at that point. And I just found that fascinating. Like, I didn't even know how to describe it. I'm like, am I reading this right? Is this a typo?
So you're talking about a D pedal.
D pedal.
Mm-hmm. And on top of that, minor. B flat minor on top of that. Oops. Mm-hmm. And then even on top of that, A major.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's definitely. That's very interesting.
Yeah, that was the most interesting harmonic moment in this clip.
Okay, wait. I want to actually hear where that is in context. It's sort of toward the beginning. After this.
Go back where Obi-Wan is. Yeah, it's after this.
Presence of my old master.
Surely he must be dead by now.
Don't underestimate the Force.
It's before this, isn't it?
The Jedi are extinct. No. Their fire has gone out of the universe. You, my friend, are all that's left of their religion. Yes.
Okay, skipping.
Obi-Wan is here. The Force is with him.
If you're right, he must not be allowed to escape.
Escape is not his plan. I must face him alone.
and it like progressively, it like adds on.
Exactly. So it's adding more and more tension to that scene. So I may not have described the exact moment in the film correctly, but you can hear where that tension is building.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point because in films or like in music, there are so many different ways to build tension or to make things bigger or smaller with that don't have to do with purely adding more like fortes to it. Like something that I feel like I hear commonly these days is more and more and more sound, like adding more,
Right.
just like more, sort of like just like a maximalist approach, just like more. I don't know. I think of Kylo Ren at the end of The Last Jedi, just being like more. Like that's how I think a lot of music can sound sometimes, is instead of like building things in more like subtle, either harmonic ways or by swapping instrumentation or giving us less before growing into more. I feel like it's sometimes a shortcut to just purely add more, like add another bass layer, now add another hit, now add another like really aggressive hit sound, and now another pounding sound.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Here's a nice subtle build in such a small, with just like, yeah, these interesting chords. I love that. I love that detailed scoring. And I think I've mentioned this on a previous episode, so sorry for repeating myself, but I think it is a mischaracterization of John Williams that he is a bombastic writer, or like that his music is just blatantly like bombastic, because I mean, he can write bombastic music for sure, but it's within like a context that has a lot of range. It's not just like the adding walls of sound all the time type of bombastic.
Yeah, and some of the more intimate music that he's written is just absolutely beautiful. And I think people overlook that quite a bit.
Yeah, and intimate. And and he's the first person to sometimes say like, we should take the music out of the scene. I think it works fine without it. I know that he has said that to Ben Burt a number of times.
Okay.
Okay, so are we ready to go to the Star Wars Music Minute Questionnaire?
Sure, let's do it.
Awesome. In exactly 3 words, what does Star Wars sound like?
So this is a really tough question, because how can you capture all of Star Wars in 3 words? But I think I have an answer for this. I'm going to say, and this is specifically about the music, I'm going to say opera without words.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah.
So that works on multiple.
Yeah, definitely. Number 2, what's something related to Star Wars music or sound that you're curious about and want to learn more?
Sure. All of this orchestrational detail is fascinating to me, and a lot of people, are very interested in the melodies because that's where the meat is. But all this filler stuff, like the stuff that we can't hear in these action scenes, or all these little musical gestures here or there, or why this particular instrument was chosen versus that one, those are questions that fascinate me far more than the melodies.
I'm kind of with you there. I mean, I'm definitely a melody type of person, and for that reason, things like orchestration and like the little underscore details are like a complete mystery to me. Like that sounds like, to me, that seems like the hardest part of the work.
Yeah, definitely.
And finally, what is a score or soundtrack that you're fond of besides anything Star Wars?
That's an unfair question because there are so many.
You can say more than one.
I came up with 3. I'll start with another John Williams score that is not Star Wars. that might actually be my favorite John Williams score, and that's Catch Me If You Can.
Interesting. Okay, what's another one?
That for an older score, I like North by Northwest by Bernard Herrmann, the Alfred Hitchcock movie. Just phenomenal score. You can get the printed copy of the orchestral score from Omni Music Publishing, so I have that if you're so inclined.
It's a good tip.
And then for something more recent, I feel like film scores in the past 5 or 10 years have gotten really, really good. Like we're getting into this another golden age of film scoring. But one that really stuck out to me was Loki by Natalie Holt. That was just, I mean, the Marvel TV shows have some really good music. And I thought that WandaVision had a good soundtrack, but when I listened to Loki, it was just like, that sound is just such a perfect match for that show that she really captured it. So, and that combination of like electronic and orchestral elements really resonates with me.
This is fascinating. That's a really good range of scores. Someone else has said Loki by Natalie Holt. Now I feel like I need to give that a listen.
Yeah, it's one of the instruments. I think she uses an Onde Martineau in the score, which is a very unusual instrument.
What is that?
Early electronic instrument.
Onde Martineau?
Yeah, Ondes space Martenot.
Okay.
It's an early electronic instrument from like the 1930s from France. Messiaen used it. I'm sure film composers have used them. Can't any recollection off the top of my head right now. My point is that it's an unusual sound. It sounds like a theremin to an extent, but it uses a capacitive strip. So as you move your finger along, you can define the sound rather than just in the air like a theremin. It's a similar sine wave.
A little bit more
sound.
precise.
Yeah, but you can still do that vibrato.
Oh no. I hope those instruments are expensive, or I'm going to want one.
They are expensive.
Okay,
they are
good.
They are rare. They
nice
are
and
expensive.
prohibitive. Great. Thank goodness. Well, thank you for adding so much to this episode, this set of minutes, and for coming on the show. Yeah, I'm really grateful for all the work that you put into this, and your analysis added quite a bit of context for me.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. This was very, I was looking forward to this quite a bit. This was a great chance to talk about these kinds of things that, don't have too many people to talk about. There are some of us, but this is a great venue for that. So, yeah. Awesome.
Are you at all interested in the other Star Wars movies?
Definitely. I'm especially interested in The Empire Strikes Back, which might be the best of the Star Wars scores. And there's one cue in particular that I really want to do. So
cool. Well, remind me what that is later. But it'll be a while before Empire Strikes Back season. But I hope there will be one. Where can people find you online, if at all, Jeremy?
Probably. I have a SoundCloud account where you can listen to some of my compositions. So that's SoundCloud.com/JSAWRUK. So that's my first initial and last name. And then I'm on Twitter at Composer314.
Awesome. All those links will be in the show notes. And yeah, I'll definitely check. I'm curious to check out your SoundCloud. Again, thank you so much. And listeners, if you want to follow, what am I talking about? Star Wars Music Minute is on all the places as well. So you can follow me on Twitter at Star Wars Musemin, TikTok at Star Wars Music Minute, YouTube. If you want to, you can listen. Sorry, most people listen to this on the podcast, but if you want to watch these episodes on YouTube or stream it from YouTube or whatever, and also catch coverage of the TV shows, then that's all on YouTube because I don't post those on the podcast. But we are finishing up Book of Boba Fett coverage. I mean, when that ends, so there's only a couple more episodes left, and we'll also be doing Kenobi season, and we did music commentary for all of the Bad Batch episodes and all the Visions stuff as well. So yes, do that. And we'll be back next week to talk about A New Hope minutes 81 through 85. We're like nearing the final home stretch of the film. So if you've stuck along the path this way, kudos to you and thanks for listening. That's all I have for today. May the Force be with you.